Okay, so welcome to our Rig Run Recovery Zone. My name's Sarah, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest, Hugo van den Broek. Is that pronounced correct?
Yeah, very good, Sarah. Thank you.
Hugo is a former elite marathon runner with an impressive PB of 2 hours 12 minutes. So he's now retired from professional running, but Hugo still coaches amateur and elite runners from around the world. So as well, on top of that, he also runs a guest house in the town of Iten in Kenya. So Hugo is here today to give us an insight on how to create a strong mindset and how to help us up our game ready for the next Rig Run event. If you have any questions today, if you can pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. But for now, Hugo, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm also pretty excited to discuss this. It's one of my favorite subjects in sports, both as when I was an athlete as now as a coach. I think I want our listeners to understand the impact of the mind on sports performance, and also understanding how you can actively take control of the mind and kind of use its power. So I made like a PowerPoint, which I will share now. And yeah, just a short introduction. I first will go through several ways, like research has shown so many different ways that our mind impacts our performance. So I want to go through that, and then a little bit of theory, and then we go to like the ways that we can actually control our mind to improve our performance. Let me try to share. Where is it? Sorry. Oh, wait. Sorry, I just worked and now I don't see. There it is. I got it. Yep. Okay. There we are. Training the mind. So this is what we talk about today. First of all, about the research that talks about how the mind impacts performance. There's some quite exciting research in this area. At least I always get excited about reading this. So there's 6 things that I picked from there. First of all, we know that there's a difference in pain threshold and pain tolerance between different athletes, especially between different levels of athletes. Pain threshold is the first moment that you feel pain, and then pain tolerance is like the maximum amount of pain you can tolerate before you feel like now it's too much. So they have done some research with amateur, let's say, recreational athletes, recreational runners or cyclists or swimmers, and then those of like sub-elite or club level, and the real top athletes. And yeah, it's pretty clear from research that the best athletes have the highest pain tolerance, so they can handle more pain. And that's pretty significant difference. So that doesn't mean that there's no amateur runner who doesn't have, a high pain tolerance. But when they compare like hundreds of amateur runners and hundreds of elite runners, the elite runners have a much higher pain tolerance. But there's even a difference between just amateur runners and regular people. Amateur runners, and especially ultra athletes, have a very high pain tolerance compared with the average population. And another thing that's interesting is that it's also trainable. So it's not just a difference that's kind of fixed, but we know also from research that in moments, in weeks or months that athletes are training hard, they have a higher level of pain tolerance than when they're kind of off season or when they're kind of in a down period of their training. So it seems like just doing hard training helps you to increase your pain tolerance. So that's something interesting. The second thing, and the third thing, yeah, a bit combined. There's been a lot of research in this area where people were subjected to a time trial or a physical task, such as running on a treadmill or holding a weight as long as possible, and then they were asked to do something before that. So one research, for example, let people watch a 3-minute video, only 3 minutes, of sick and dying animals. So it was not very nice. It was kind of an emotional video for most people. And half of the participants were told, just watch the video. We are looking at you through a camera, but just watch the video. And after that, you have to hold a weight. Whereas the other half of the people were told to control their emotions for 3 minutes. So trying not to show any emotions, whereas some others were told to exaggerate their emotions. And yeah, the interesting thing was that there was a significant difference in their performance afterwards. So those who were told to control their emotions performed less on the physical task. So they weren't able to lift the weight for as long as needed, whereas those who were just watching the video were doing that much better. The same thing is shown in a lot of research when people have to do a computer task, something where anything actually where you have to concentrate for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and then you have to do a time trial. There's quite a significant difference there. So for example, people were told to run on the treadmill a 5-kilometer time trial as fast as they could on 2 different occasions. So 1 week they would simply run the time trial, and in another week they first had to do a 30-minute computer task and then run the time trial. When they asked them after the computer task if they were tired, people reported not feeling any tiredness. However, they ran about 1.5 minutes slower on the time trial. So that's quite interesting. Of course, if you think about your own work when you're coming from your job and then after that going for training, yeah, seems like it's very likely to impact your performance. And there's lots of research done in that area. So it's quite interesting that generally when people have to do something where they have to concentrate, the difference in performance after that is about 10 to 20%. Yeah, the fourth one is also, yeah, I found it also quite interesting, where people were asked to cycle in different conditions. So they had one cool condition. It was, I think, about 18 degrees in the lab, and they were told to cycle as fast as they could. Then in the second condition, it was hot. It was around 26 degrees Celsius. And in the third condition, it was also 26 degrees, but they were deceived. They were told that it wasn't hot. So they were kind of fooled. The researchers would tell them that, oh, it's pretty cool in here. Your body temperature is down. It's not so hot, stuff like that. So at the end, it was clear that the people in the cool condition performed better than in the hot condition, which is pretty obvious. That's what everyone would expect. But the funny thing was that in the deceived condition, where it was equally hot, but they were told that it wasn't hot, they performed just as well as in the cool condition. And the funny thing was that even their skin temperature was lower than in the regular hot condition. So yeah, if you believe it's not so hot, it seems like you could potentially perform just as well as when it's cool weather. And the fifth one is also interesting. This is where people are shown happy faces or sad faces on a computer screen, but this is done subliminally. So that means like they're not aware of it. They're looking at the computer screen, but in a split of a second, a happy face or a sad face is shown. And in other cases, they were showing action words such as go, strong, fast, and alternated with inaction words, or on other occasion inaction words. So inaction words is like slow, tired, heavy. So athletes who saw the happy faces or the action words performed 10 to 20% better than those who saw the sad faces or the inaction words. This just to show you how the mind, even if we don't realize it at all, how the mind impacts our performance. So that's quite interesting. And the last one, effect of mental state on our running economy. This is where a group of amateur runners was followed for several weeks, and they were asked to report, like every day they had to fill out a questionnaire about their mental state and reporting like how angry they felt or how much tension or depression, etc. And then they would test in the lab their running economy. So running economy that is basically you're running at a certain speed. How much oxygen do you use at that speed? So if you use less oxygen at the same speed, your running economy has improved, because that's a positive thing. You'll perform better. And this clearly showed that in the weeks that people had a better health profile, so when they reported less feelings of anger, tension, and depression, their running economy improved. So these are just several researchers, several results that tell you how the mind impacts our performance. And now we go to the central governor theory. Timothy Noakes, he's a scientist from South Africa, sports scientist. He wrote a book, Lore of Running. He's quite famous in the world of sports, especially in the running world. I know his book is like, 800, 900 pages. So it's sometimes called the Bible of running. So he was one of the first to came up with a theory about this, because he said everything I've learned about physiology tells me that an athlete getting tired is like a car running out of fuel. That the car comes to a dead end and there's no way you can still go, because maybe your glycogen levels are finished, or there's too much lactate in your muscles, in your blood. So he said, that's what I've learned, but that's not what I see in the reality, because when he was at the 96 Olympics, I think it was, where the South African Tukwana beat the South Korean Lee, and they came to the finish line, and Lee, of course, who finished second, he made a lap of honor after the race. So Timothy Noakes was like, how is that possible? This guy must be super motivated. He really wanted to win the gold medal. When he came to the finish line, I would expect him to collapse and not be able to run anymore. But he just stopped for a few seconds and made a lap of honor. How did he do that? According to the theory, that's not possible. At the same time, he did some tests in the lab where he realized that when people do sub-maximal exercise, they recruit about 30 to 50% of their muscle fibers. And when they do maximal exercise, so as hard as they can, they still only recruit 60% of their muscle fibers. They're not even coming close to 100%. So that was also interesting to him. Like, why would we have all these muscles and we can't recruit it? He did it, or some others actually did a time to exhaustion test. Time to exhaustion test is a test whereby it's often used by scientists, where athletes are told to cycle at a certain wattage and as long as they can. So they are told to just continue as long as you can until you're completely tired and you can't go anymore. So he had a group of rugby players who cycled at 242 watts and stopped at a certain point where they said, I'm dead, I can't go anymore. He gave them a 3-second break or so and said, now go 7 to 10 seconds as fast as you can. And they were able to still turn around 731 watts on average. So that's like almost 3 times the amount that the wattage they were cycling at. So he says that also tells me that we can actually do better than we think we can. He saw runners on the track who slow down halfway the race and then start accelerating again at the end. So all this was not in line with kind of our initial theory about how the body works when we're exercising. So Timothy Noakes came up with a theory called the central governor theory. The central governor theory basically says that your brain is the central governor, and your brain wants to make sure that mostly that you don't die. The brain works for self-protection, wants to make sure that there's enough oxygen coming to the brain, there's enough oxygen coming, to your heart, that there's enough that you don't get a heart attack, that you don't pull a muscle. So luckily that's how our brain protects us. And when we are starting as athletes, let's say we are not used to train and we're starting to train, the brain does that very well, maybe a little bit too well, too good, because it kind of, with the earliest sign of tiredness, our brain, for most athletes, will tell us, okay, slow down because you're coming in the danger zone. So how this works is that there are biological and physiological effects of training or racing. For example, there's muscle damage, your glycogen levels go down, your body is getting hotter. And these physiological effects are kind of alarm bells for the brain. The brain then reduces the muscle fiber recruitment and the cardiac output. And in that way, it is protecting us. It's kind of the brain feels like we're getting in a danger zone. So let's reduce the cardiac output. Let's recruit a little bit less muscle fiber so that we're safe, so that there's enough oxygen coming to the brain. We don't faint, we don't die. Now, we can actually override that partially. Because like I said, if you are a starting athlete, this central governor is quite tough on you in a way that it slows you down very soon. Whereas the more training you do, the more you get used to the pain, and also your brain gets used to the pain. So every time when you train hard, it's a way of telling your brain like, okay, this is tough. I feel pain. There's a lot of lactate in my body. But yeah, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm not going to die. I can handle this. So every time you train hard, it is a way of your central governor kind of being adjusted a little bit and giving you a little bit extra space to push. Motivation and mental skills can also work very well. I will talk more about the mental skills later. They can help you to override the brain. But at the end, the brain always takes over out of self-protection. Even the world's best athletes can't run themselves to death, thankfully. So, but you can come pretty close to what your maximum is.
Hugo,
Then, yeah,
Hu-
sorry.
sorry, can I just interrupt a second? We can see your slideshow, but the slides aren't keeping up with what you're speaking about. So I think you need to start the presentation.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We can just see the first one.
You can only see the first one. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, okay. So, maybe I shouldn't make them big then.
I think if you do like start presentation maybe on the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And then you can just click to the slide that you're on.
Let me try it this way. I'm not seeing it in my screen now. Let me try again. It's annoying. Okay, let me try again. Okay. Okay. You see the first one now?
Yeah, I see the cover one, yeah.
Do you see
And
the
then,
second
yeah,
one now?
if you click on that, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so now you can see the second.
Yeah.
Now I go to the third. Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we've talked about this, how the mind impacts performance, those 6 points, those 6 different types of research. Then I was here. Thanks for informing me, Sarah. That's important. This is how the mind impacts our performance according to Timothy Noakes and the theory of how it works. So these are the things that the slides that I've just discussed. Then I hope you can now see the slide of our pool of mental energy. This is another point that I wanted to discuss. I don't know if anyone read the book Thinking Fast and Slow from Daniel Kahneman. It's quite interesting. It talks also a lot about this. Basically, what research has shown is that there's mental energy needed for different things, such as self-control. I talked about the research where people had to control their emotions. But any type of self-control. There was another research where people were given, like they were in a room with lots of people, and then some people were given cookies that were smelling really nice, and then others were given like a cucumber, and they were told like, okay, you can't swap, you can't have the cookies. So those people who had the cucumbers, they kind of had to control themselves, and they didn't do very well in a physical task after that. Sorry. Doing studying, any kind of computer work, any kind of mental task, and also hard physical tasks. So all of these things are all using the same pool of mental energy. So basically everything that requires any kind of effort drinks from the same pool of mental energy. And even if you don't feel tired after that, your mental energy can be reduced. So that is something very important to realize, that yeah, basically anything we do takes away our mental energy, and that will affect our sports performance. So when we talk about, if you want to perform in a training session or especially in a race, this is something to think about. So how do we maximize our mental energy? This is something, of course, when I was an athlete, that I was very much aware of and very much busy with. First of all, you have to realize that the physical part and the mental part are intertwined. So first, that realization is important. Secondly, you have to make sure you eat, drink, and sleep well. That's important because, yeah, also, again, research has shown that if you don't eat well, you don't drink well, you don't sleep well, this affects your mental energy. Unless if you talk about drinking beer, that actually affects your mental energy in a negative way. So alcohol is not very good for your mental energy. Then avoiding stress and maintaining good relationships with the people around you seems to be quite important, because you can also turn that around. Having stress or not having good relationships with the people around you costs mental energy, which affects your performance in physical tasks. Taking breaks, especially before training, that's quite important. I used to, between 2000 and 2007, I had a job. After that, I went to Kenya in 2007, so I was lucky. I didn't have to go to the office anymore. But when I was working, I used to come home at 5 and then still have an evening session. So I used to sit down and take a cup of tea and prepare mentally for the training. And I really felt like that was quite important for me to have a good performance in training, not to go immediately from my office to the training, but to take a little bit of a break. Even taking breaks during the day is important, of course, in that way, because that way you make sure your mental energy stays high. Another important way is sometimes switching off your phone and avoiding social media. So this is something, we all use social media, even top athletes, and sometimes that really costs a lot of energy. People sometimes don't even realize that, but you're doing your job, and then in between you have a small break. You go on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. You never really recover. You're constantly getting information, and that eats away your mental energy. So when the time comes that you have to perform, you think you're doing well, but you're not, because your mental energy is definitely affected by all that information that you had to absorb. In the same way, focusing on one task at a time is important when it comes to maximizing your mental energy. Doing more things at the same time, you might be able to do it, but it will drain you. The second last thing is, it seems like from research that when people are a little bit tired and they eat something small, some biscuits, a banana, a slice of bread, they can actually recover their mental energy and do better. Sorry, and the last thing is practicing mental training. So that's the point I want to talk about right now. Sorry, practicing of mental training is quite important in improving your performance. So there's several things I want to talk about. First of all, visualization. Visualization is also known as mental imagery. This is something elite athletes do it all the time. I used to do this from the age of 20, 21. I was taught this by a sports psychologist. I went to him because I felt like my performance on the track was not in line with what I did in training, and it really helped me a lot. So what you do with visualization actually is that you can sit down on a chair, you can lie down on your bed, and you imagine yourself training or racing. You try to do it as vividly as possible. So that means using different senses. For example, if I would imagine a marathon, I see myself getting into, how do you say, to the start area of the marathon. I would hear the crowd. I hear the footsteps of the runners around me who are doing the last part of their warm-up. I feel the sunshine on my skin. I smell the massage oil that some athletes have on their legs. I see the athletes doing their strides. So you try to use different senses and try to make it very vividly. And you try to see it through your own eyes. So in the first person, not as an outsider looking at yourself. And then when you visualize, you can try out different scenarios. You don't always have to imagine that you're winning a race or that you're running a personal best. You can do that, it can help, but you can also imagine yourself in different situations. For example, I would imagine when I was running marathons, I would imagine that I miss a water bottle at the 10-kilometer station, and imagine myself staying calm, telling myself it's okay, make sure you're in front of the group at 15K so that you get the bottle. You can imagine yourself falling down and getting up and gradually closing the gap to the group in front of you. You can imagine yourself at the end of the race where it's getting hard. You feel how painful it is, but you focus on getting a good performance. So there's many different things you can visualize, that you can imagine. And yeah, depending on what you visualize, it can have different effects. Visualization has proven effects like increasing your motivation. It improves your focus. It improves your mental strength. It can also increase your confidence and regulate your arousal. So arousal meaning like how nervous you are before a race. So I felt like that helped me a lot. Visualization would really help me getting in the right mindset before a race or even before a training session. The next one is meditation and relaxation. Again, just like visualization, these are things, mental tools that are used by elite athletes, but not only athletes, they are used by top performers in all areas of life. So even mountain climbers, piano players, or people who give presentations on a stage in front of a big crowd. So meditation and relaxation seems to work very well for most people. Some research shows that professional athletes average around 2 hours and 12 minutes of relaxation exercises per week. So that gives you an idea of how important people think it is. Most elite athletes agree that doing stuff like visualization and meditation and relaxation exercises are an important part of their training. I used to use something called progressive muscle relaxation, PMR. This is a way whereby I would lie down on a bed and basically go through all my muscles mentally, starting with my toes, my calves, and then going up, the quads, the hamstrings, abdominals, all the way up to my head. And every time I would put a little bit of tension on the muscle for a few seconds and then relax it. And do that normally twice per muscle. So a little bit of tension on the muscle, kind of flex it a bit and then relax it. And all the time I'm just concentrating on that muscle, in between breathing in and out, and then going to the next muscle. So I really felt like it helped me to get confidence, to get relaxed, and also to get to know my body and to feel like a little bit of tension, the difference between a muscle that is 100% relaxed and a muscle that is 95% relaxed. So yeah, I feel like this is an important tool. What we know from research is that it can improve your running economy. And from my experience, it can also improve your confidence and your focus. The third mental tool is self-talk. This is also a quite important one. It shows just, when you read the research about it, it's just, even within 2 weeks of training self-talk, there's a big improvement. Self-talk is actually, okay, in a way, everyone talks to themselves when they're training, whether they're cycling or swimming or running. But with self-talk, I mean consciously talking to yourself, using certain words or short phrases that you have prepared. For example, you can think about things like smooth and easy, telling yourself this is your day, keep on pushing, you can do this, you are mentally tough, getting ready for the launch, things like that, that you tell yourself during a training session or during a hard workout or a race, seem to have a very positive effect on your performance. What most athletes say is that if you don't do it, negative thoughts can come in. For example, you start to think like, oh, it's so heavy, oh, I'm tired, and that has a negative effect on you. Whereas when you practice the self-talk, you actually take control of your own mental game during the race or the training session. So in that way, it seems to have a very positive effect on your focus. Athletes who do self-talk report that running at the same or cycling at the same pace as before suddenly starts to feel easier. How you do the self-talk depends a bit on the person, but generally it seems to work better if you talk in the second person. So saying you can do this rather than I can do this. And for endurance sports, motivational self-talk, that is like saying like you can do this, this is your day, seems to work better than instructional self-talk, which is like saying like use your arms, keep your head up. And research has shown improvements of 20 up to almost 40% by using self-talk. The last slide, the last thing I want to discuss is how to focus. Having like the best focus, 100% focus during a training session, a workout, or a race is very important because it really helps your performance. When we talk about focus, what I mean is basically that you are fully focused on the present. You have no thoughts about the future. You don't think about the past. You're not busy thinking like, oh, last week I was sick, maybe I will feel the effects today. You don't think about things you have to do after the training session. You're fully focused on the now. When you are able to do that, pain and tiredness become irrelevant and you become like you're getting into the zone. And that's when you have your best performance. So this is something that is not very easy to control, but there are several things you can do to increase the likelihood of getting a good focus. So first of all, you have to train consistently. If you hardly train, or if you train like 3 times this week and then you stop training for 2 weeks, you're not going to get a good focus. So first of all, physically, you have to be prepared. Believing that you can handle the task, so the training session or the workout or the race, also helps. So if you start, let's say now you've never run more than half an hour and you tell yourself, okay, I want to run 90 minutes or 2 hours tomorrow, that's going to make it very hard to focus because that's too big of a jump. So, but if you gradually increase the training load, you can believe that you can handle what you're about to do. The third point is knowing your why. Why are you training? Why are you working out? The better idea you have of why you're doing it, the more motivated you can be, and the more you can use that why to get you motivated and to get in the right focus. Setting a goal helps with that also. Setting a goal can be for the year, to lose a certain amount of weight or to compete at a certain race, but it can be also for every training session. Setting a goal of like, what do you want to run if you're or cycle or whatever you're doing? What is your goal for this workout? Then, of course, practicing the things we just discussed, the visualization, the relaxation, meditation, and the self-talk. These are all things that help you getting into the zone. And finally, making sure you're fueled and hydrated also helps. And the last point, this is actually a quote from is a sports psychologist called Csikszentmihalyi. He says the best moments in life happen in flow. That's where true happiness lies. And I agree with that. You know, most people would think like when you think about happiness, that's when you are relaxed, you're sitting on the sofa, you're watching a TV show or something. But research shows that most people are at their happiest when they are very focused on doing a certain task. So when you're able to get to that focus in training, for example, many times that that's how we manage to improve our happiness. I think I'm done with the PowerPoint, Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hugo. That's really interesting. So like I said at the start, if anyone has any questions, they can just pop them in the chat box. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first one. So we talked a lot about visualization and seeing a positive outcome at the end and things. So we all know that sometimes like a race or a competition or a training doesn't go to plan. How do you then recover from that if you visualize this great session, you turn up, it doesn't work out, and then maybe self-doubt begins to creep in? Is there any tips that you've got for coming back the next day and doing it again? Or
well, I think it's, first of all, it's good to realize that we're all human and we all have negative thoughts sometimes. So doing the self-talk or the visualization, it's not about being perfect. It's just when these things happen and negative thoughts comes in or doubt comes in, it's okay to recognize it and say like, oh, okay, here's a doubt coming in, but I don't need that right now. You kind of push it away and you replace it with something else. That's what you teach yourself when you're doing those things, when you're doing the meditation and the self-talk. It's about kind of accepting where you are, but trying to be very consistent in ignoring, or maybe not ignoring, but like looking at negative thoughts that's come in, but don't give them any attention. Try not to let it influence you in an emotional way, and then replacing it with positive thoughts or with helpful action stuff. So I hope that helps. So
definitely. So the other question I was thinking about is, a lot of people, like especially in rig run, we have league tables and things. They're constantly comparing themselves to other people's performances. Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that people should be just looking intrinsically at how they're getting on themselves?
I mean, ideally, of course, when you are working out, you want to focus on yourself and your own improvement, for sure. However, performance of others can sometimes motivate you. So I feel like it's not a bad thing. Sometimes in the world, like when you read those, let's say self-help books, it's like it's all about yourself, being in contact with yourself and improving yourself. Yes, that's true, but it's human also to look at others and say like, hey, I want to be better than that. Or you have a neighbor or a colleague, someone a friend who had a certain performance and you want to be better than them. So I feel like that's still okay. It can motivate you. And sometimes people get more motivated than ever because they compare themselves with their friends. So it can definitely motivate you, but it should be something that's not in front of your head while you're training. When you're training, you should focus on yourself. That's true. Just let the others motivate you and use that motivation to work out well, but it shouldn't be something that is constantly on your mind.
Yeah, cool. When you talked at the start about emotions affecting your workout and the outcome, I always remember being told, I think it was probably when I was in Kenya, when you start to struggle, the best tip I got is to smile.
Yes,
as soon as you start to smile, it releases endorphins and you actually do feel a lot better.
Now the funny thing, I had that on my paper here about the smiling research, but I said let me just mention it when there's still time left, and I felt like time was up. But yeah, there's it's a good point that you mentioned, and we've heard people say like Eliud Kipchoge smiles in the last part of the race, right? So yeah, I've read the research into it, and so they had 24 runners. And they let them run 6 minutes on a treadmill, and they would measure, like again, their running economy, so how economically they would run, and they let them do that 4 different times, so 4 different occasions, On one occasion, they were told to smile. Another occasion, they were told to frown, like make a face like they were working hard. On a third occasion, they were told to try to relax their shoulders and their upper body. So they would just tell them, you just run on the treadmill, but focus on relaxation. And the fourth one was just like, do whatever you want, just run, right? And it turned out that for most people, smiling was the most economical. So once they started smiling, their body used less oxygen, meaning that it became actually easier for her, for them. The heart rate went down.
It's definitely the
However,
best
there were, sorry?
I was going to say it's definitely the best tip I've ever had.
Yeah. So it's we don't know exactly why, but we think just like with the other research that I said, where subliminally people were showing happy faces, it seems like being happy, seeing a happy face or feeling the happiness in your own face is not in line with feeling tired or feeling the pain from training. So it's like we tell ourselves we are okay. This can't be very heavy because we're smiling, right? So I should say on a side note actually that in that group of 24 runners, 5 of them actually had their best performance when they were frowning. So that might work for a few others, right? So yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
So Mohammed is asking a question, and I think he's asking for a little bit of information about how you felt about leaving your job in the Netherlands and moving to Kenya and how that came about. And
Yeah. That's a good one. Well, for me, like, so when I finished university, I was 24. The first thing I did is I went to Kenya for 2 months to train before I took like a real job. And that's when I met my wife, Hilda Kibet, who was just finished with college, and she came to the Netherlands the next year, 2001. This was. So I from 2000 to 2007, I already had a connection with Kenya through my wife, and once a year, normally I would go there for a few weeks to train. And I was a good runner. In those years, I ran like 63 minutes on a half marathon and 2 hour 12 on a marathon. So it was always my dream to be a professional runner. So when my wife in 2007 became Dutch and got a good contract with Adidas, it was relatively easy to quit my job because, from that moment, we didn't really need my income anymore because she had a good contract with Adidas and we were free to go wherever we wanted to go. So in that way, it wasn't that hard. Of course, it's a bit different when you're working 5 hours a day and combining that with 2 training sessions a day. And then suddenly you have the whole day for yourself, right? So you train, you eat, you sleep, and you train again in the afternoon. But I got used to that. Yeah, it wasn't that hard, and you do some stuff on your computer, and I kept myself busy with reading, so that was okay. It was okay, and and in Kenya it's relatively easy. If I would do it in the Netherlands, where I come from, it would be harder because everyone is in their job, or if they're not, they have a family with kids, and you can't meet so much. Whereas in Kenya, life is much more outside. There are many more people who don't have a job, so it's and especially where I live in E10, of course, it's a runner's paradise, as you know. So there's so many runners here. So yeah, it's you're not lonely. Let's put it that way. It's easy to make contacts and meet people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. Okay, well, I think we'll call that a day. Thank you very much for your time, Hugo. That was very insightful. Yeah, thank you. Everyone, we'll
Thanks.
see you next time. Thanks.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.